SEO professionals face endless content demands. Marketing teams need fresh approaches, audience expectations keep rising, journalists bring a unique skill set to content creation. Yet traditional SEO often prioritizes algorithms over humans. Keyword-focused content frequently misses emotional connections, and search engines, as they continue to evolve, these tactics don't hold the same weight that they used to. How can you balance technical requirements with genuine audience engagement? This is the Voice of Search podcast. My name's Tyson, and joining us today is Dina Rickman, Senior Director at GoFundMe. GoFundMe helps people raise funds for personal causes worldwide. Today, Dina and I are going to be discussing journalistic principles and how they can transform your content strategy and amplify your search performance. Dina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's we were talking earlier. It's hot there in the UK, so it seems like a fair amount of entertainment behind that aspect.
We enjoy. Yes, well, British people love any weather event, so there's a lot to talk about here. And yeah, actually, when I left journalism, I think they. In my leaving card, they always mock up like a kind of front page, and I got one about I think they were basically just laughing at my obsession with people writing about the weather, because I was like, you need to write an article about the weather because people are going to read it. So we need to, we have this thing in England called the Met Office, and you can just phone them. They're the kind of meteorologists, but they're so nice to journalists. You phone them and they give you a personal weather forecast. It is insane. And I would be like, just phone them up, ask them if it's going to rain. And it was great. Got some content.
And do you have to be a journalist to phone them, or can just the general public call and be like, I'm curious to know what's going on today?
I'm going to ruin that, it's inundated now. You have to say you're a journalist, but they never ever checked. So, I think you probably get away with it once. One of my colleagues, her surname was Rainey, and when she phoned them up, which is kind of a common surname, they thought that she was joking, and they did hang up on her. So if they sense that you're not serious. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Well, that gives me something. Next time I visit the UK, I'm definitely going to have to get that number and give them a call.
Phone them now for WhatsApp. Yeah.
True, yeah, and just be like, hey, I'm in Germany. What can you tell me about the weather?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, I'm excited for this conversation today because I feel like, oftentimes we're just talking this podcast from the core SEO professionals, and even though you've worked in SEO for quite some time, you come from the journalist background, and so I feel like you're bringing a new angle, a new kind of dynamic, which especially in this age of content, as search engines, LLMs are changing how content is being perceived. And in some ways I feel like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like if I was a journalist or someone that was more on the content side, I would be almost happy about some of these changes, because it feels less maybe programmatic, or kind of less tactical in the sense of content in the world of search right now versus where it was maybe 5 years ago.
I think journalists are never happy. We're not happy people. I say that, and I'm not a journalist anymore, but you never get out of that mindset. So, but I think the world of search right now is really exciting, and it actually, what is exciting about it is that there's a constant change, and that you become an expert in May and you've lost all your expertise by July, because you're everything has suddenly changed again. You think you know exactly what's going on, and then bam, Google AI. And I'm sure that by the time this podcast goes out, 17 different things will have happened that will completely change the game. So that is exciting, because it reminds me actually of when I first got into journalism, which is in the kind of it was kind of late 2009, early 2010, and it was at the time when the internet was fundamentally changing the way that newspapers were set up. and it was this challenge to their sort of their core being, their raison d'etre. And you had these editors who would know their audience so incredibly well, and they had this idea of like, this is my person, this is the person I'm targeting, like a kind of ICP now, and you know, and they could know that sometimes because of the buyers, and then SEO and digital publishing, it opened everything up, and they had to basically relearn everything. And in a way, it was easier to relearn, right? Because when you're online, you've got real-time data. So like, I know exactly how many people are reading past like the third or fourth paragraph, because I've, you know, can set up on page analytics to see that, and I know what sentence people are sharing and that kind of thing. But at the time, they didn't see that, and it was actually an extremely challenging and difficult time, which for me was a good time to enter the industry, because I didn't really have any preconceptions. I was just like, I'm young, I'm green, I really want to learn this, and I'll just kind of, and I mean, one thing that was scary, it was like people who I thought had loads to teach me, they were like, I don't actually know what's going on anymore. Like they were basically like, you will know more than me because you are a digital native. Because back in the day, you know, when millennials were young, we were digital natives, but look at us now. Not to presume anything about your age, but yeah. So we just got to work. We got to experimenting and we got to learning. And then I think that's something that's served me well throughout my career. And I think that kind of, like, the fundamental principle of journalism, right, is to kind of find out what's going on and tell everyone else. And that's, you know, very similar to like what you do in this podcast, right? You're gaining a lot of knowledge from speaking to other kind of industry experts, a lot of them with like a different perspective, and you're kind of bundling that knowledge and telling other people. That becomes useful, and it becomes a kind of tool which I'm sure you're kind of using to help further, you know, it's like, not that I'm saying that you're doing this just for you, but you know, I'm sure it's helpful for different parts of content.
No, I mean, it's there's definitely a selfish side to this. I mean, it's like I get to pick the people that I'm, you know, hey, this will sound like an interesting conversation. But it's like you're able to learn that firsthand knowledge, that firsthand experience. And I feel like in content and search right now, you know, and I'm hopeful that type of reward will continue, where it feels like, you know, especially in the age of like generative content, where it's a regurgitation of everything that exists already, that firsthand experience, like net new contribution to something, to like the knowledge base, you know, should and hopefully is rewarded from it. Because, you know, we don't want to just read the same thing over and over and over again. Like, we want to hear something new, a new take, a new perspective. And it does feel like some of the, maybe like the fundamental principles of like journalism.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's all about human attention, right? I mean, journalism wants to tell you something that you don't already know. So the number one thing to do is find out what that thing is and then present it in a way that will be interesting to other people. Because there's lots of other things, and you know, and make it something that's relevant, because there's lots of things that not everyone knows for very good reason. Like, you know, what I had for breakfast, we don't need to go into that. But, you know, something like corruption, or a way to make your life easier, or something that will kind of add value and benefit to how you spend a weekend, or a product that can, you know, save you 20 minutes. These are all important things to kind of know and talk about. I don't know, one of my favorite quotes of journalism, and I don't know who said it, is that you kind of need rat-like cunning and a plausible manner, and then a little literary ability. And actually, that is quite true, probably, of SEO writing now that we have LLMs. You just need to find out what it is, add that kind of context, add that interest, and then, yeah, make sure that it's not written in a very AI way. Although I think, you know, with really good GPTs, that should be okay.
Which is, I mean, great segue. Yeah. And I feel like we wouldn't be able to get out of this conversation without kind of asking, like, what's your perspective on this, as far as like generative content, like someone as a, you know, coming up from that content creation and a journalist, like, it feels like maybe it's like a double-edged sword, or there's some bittersweet to it. Like, what's your kind of, I guess, personal take on it?
I mean, it was quite funny. I was talking to someone at a former, like at a large British news institution, and I was like, "Are you using Gen AI?" And they were like, "I think I said, are you using ChatGPT?" And this is in 2023, and they were like, "What's ChatGPT?" So I wouldn't. I mean, in terms of and you know, remember these are journalists, so they really should know. There was like no excuse. I was like, "How has this passed you by?" But. So, I mean, I know that we think about it all the time, but it hasn't permeated in the whole of society in the way that you might imagine. And I think it's helpful. Like obviously I'm British and I'm cynical and I feel sick when I say the word storytelling, but it is really about, like, unfortunately it is true, like storytelling is important and you need to ensure that your stories are compelling. But the number one way to do that is, it's much easier to find a good story than to be a brilliant writer. Like, you know, like there's a reason why they call it the great American novel. It's not like there's loads of them hanging around. So you've got more time to find your great story, and to think through what it is that you're trying to tell people and how to do that in an interesting way. And then the writing is almost less like of a stress. And again, I think it is making sure that you do have a unique voice. But no, I think it's a net positive, really, just in terms of actually allowing people to focus on the why and the more interesting parts of it.
So like, to that point, I feel like search right now feels like there's this like momentum swing back towards like almost like core consumer behavior principles, where it's like less on the kind of formulaic checklist kind of approach. And I've like had more and more conversations where people are talking about, I mean, it's said in different ways, but essentially it's consumer behavior. It, like, as you're describing some of these like journalist elements, it's like, sure, you want something new, you want something like kind of real to present to the readers, or like the listeners in this case. But it feels like also there's some elements too that have been a part of it, where it's like you still need to grab the listener. And like you were saying, like back a little earlier in the conversation, of like kind of that like grabbing, and I think you made the reference towards make your life easier, and I forget it now, but like, so it seems like some of those principles of consumer behavior have been in journalism, at least from like a principle standpoint, for quite some time.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's all about light and shade. Like, I know no one reads a physical newspaper anymore, but you know, the way that you would lay out a newspaper, and I'm just explaining this, and this might be of interest to like people 10 years younger than me as like a historical artifact, is that the first page would be the serious news, like the most important thing, you know, that's going on, and then you would kind of be like, oh, that's a bit heavy. And then you would turn over and you would probably not look at page 2, which is full of like the boring news that you have to tell everyone. And then page 3 would be like the fun story, you know, so something quirky, something interesting, like something that might go viral on Facebook 6 years ago. And that's kind of the principles of journalism: light and shade, keep it really interesting. And, you know, and I think, thinking back to editors, like, and I've worked with some amazing editors who have this like intuition about what their readers will be interested in, and they were so gifted. And actually, what is amazing now is that we can all be that editor. Like, you don't need to, you know, it's just about looking through the data and kind of understanding, because before it was a kind of intuition and a gift, and now it's like, okay, well, we dig deep into user behavior and we can kind of understand this, then we can all create something and have this vision of who we're talking to. And I think that that's the key thing, and that is kind of what SEO is now. But SEO is becoming, I think before SEO, maybe sometimes people would sort of think of it as like, you know, I think we've all had conversations like, oh, is it brand or is it SEO? And it's like, SEO is brand and SEO is marketing and SEO is everything. And it is the content and the things that people are most interested in is what like SEO is. And it has to be, and to that point, it has to be interesting and not just like, oh, bang, hitting this keyword, like bang, hitting this keyword. But I think really good people have known that all of the time. Like, I don't think that that's a new insight. I think the people who are really good at this have always done that, and it hasn't changed. And in fact, they're in a really good position now.
Well, and going back to like that editor component, like you said, like the really good editors have that intuition of what their audience wants to read.
Yeah.
Like, is that how does someone develop that? Because that to me feels like at the crux of where SEO and kind of content should be living, because it's like that's what we need to know, and that's like I feel like that's what we should be striving for in that sense. So it's like, what do you think leads in someone to be able to be that type of editor?
I mean, I think you do, like, it's easier now, right? Because we have data. So if I put out a piece of content, like, we can talk about entry points. And I suppose when you have a newspaper, you have a physical product that you know people are reading, you know people are interacting with. But also within a newspaper, or within even digital products, where before we had other, like, you know, when we were thinking about, like, what's the entry point for people to come online? Like, you know, so I used to work for a magazine called The Week, which I think is kind of across Europe and America as well. And then it was like, well, why would, and the whole point of the magazine was it was a digest of the news in that particular week. So then it was like, why would you come online? You know, what's the entry point? What's the reason? And it's about kind of thinking through what that person is, and then thinking through the way that that publisher would kind of attract those people, and then having an idea, looking at what the data says, experimenting and iterating. And then in a previous newspaper, so I used to work freelance for a newspaper, and I would suggest kind of weekly or bi-weekly columns that I would write about, and they would be, some of them would go viral, some of them would not, kind of depended, and we kind of learned together about what those readers were interested in, what might be a better topic, what people responded to. So I mean, it's the same thing that like an SEO would do, right? Or like anyone who's working in content, put stuff out, see what the reaction is, see what the entry points are, see what's worked, what hasn't, and then iterate. And it doesn't have to be like a gift, it can just be something you learn.
I can see that. I feel like maybe as you're using that data tool, it's like you just become trained and you learn, you know, to quickly kind of like identify it. But beyond kind of like the SEO journalist combination.
Yeah.
Obviously you're British, and you mentioned kind of working for a US company. I feel like, you know, there's an interesting kind of combination to that. And one, I don't know, this is going to sound random, but like one thing that I've wondered is, as just a user and as an American, like I see a lot of British media. And so it's like there's one piece that it's like, okay, yeah, shared language. I mean, some people will argue on that, but it's like there's that element, but it's like search engines typically really try to target, and it's like we've been taught of even having href lang tags of like US English, British English, but it's like what resonates so much on kind of like the British media? Like where does that come from?
I mean, okay, so we've always had British exports to America in the media. So I think, you know, Tina Brown, who edited Vanity Fair, what was that, 80s, 90s, was she British or was her husband British? But, you know, they kind of were in the UK and they came over. There's some very famous examples of sort of British exports. And I think that the British media, and this is only true in the media, I cannot talk about it as being true in the corporate world before my colleagues get really kind of annoyed at me, is that British people would kind of push the boundaries quite a lot more in a way that kind of worked. And I you know, we talked about working in the 2010s in newspapers, and it was like it was so much fun, because it was like the game had changed and everything was for the taking, and we knew what people were interested in, and, you know, to the point of shared language, and I do think it's a shared language. Although if one more, like, every time I like speak to my American colleagues, I'm like, oh, are you going to have a bottle of water? You know, we were kind of heavily aware that you could attract American traffic by writing about American things. And I never worked for The Guardian, but you can see there that they actually changed their domain to a .com because they realized that the US traffic was bigger. And I think, you know, Britain is a small-ish country. Doesn't maybe always feel that way to us, but when you begin to kind of look at it, I work across 20 countries in my job now. Britain has 70 million people. I mean, I think the US, what are we talking about, like 300 million, bit more,
like 350 or
350 give or take. Yeah. So like that level of scale, you immediately begin to realize, as the traffic comes in, as the data comes in, as the visitors come in, to scale in the UK, you got to go abroad. And America is such a big country. To scale there, you don't need to really think about crossing borders. So I think that might be the key difference. And then it was clear to us that we could also attract quite a lot of American viewers. So one thing that happened when I was kind of very early and very green in this whole world of SEO and content was Prince George, the royal baby. So I still think to this, like, was born, I think that was like, 2011, 2012? I mean, and to this day, maybe later, I'd have to look it up, and I'm sorry for not knowing, but like to this day, I think I have written more words about Prince George than anyone else in the world, like living or dead, because I have, like, to get to the top of Google for Prince George when his mother was pregnant with him, and again, like, this is a kind of like, it was a very much a content and audience play. It was a constant updating about Prince George, and it was like, what can we write about Prince George today? And I was like, it's like, I think at that point he was, still a fetus, so it was not even born. It was just like, is he going to be born very imminently? And to sort of, and there was this sort of constant idea of like, this is the thing people are searching for. We need to talk about like how to get kind of attention to it. Or another example of the time where we were acutely aware of American interest. I mean, maybe we could talk through the royals again without actually mentioning Prince George, because what we could say is like, we were acutely aware of American interest in the early 2010s and the 2011s with the marriage of Prince William, with Prince George being born. And I think that was a really, really key time when we realized that we could attract a lot of global attention. And then we began to realize that a lot of the time we were able to kind of attract and keep these audiences. And I think a lot of that is maybe because the tone of British tabloids is very, very different from the American tabloids quite a lot. Like, so, I mean, when you think about a product like the Mail Online, and it is a product, and the sidebar of shame, we used to call it, and, people would get stuck on that website for hours and hours and hours. And I did too. And they knew exactly what they were doing, and they were producing something that was incredibly compelling. And a lot of the time people were like, well, I don't think they should write about this. I don't think they should write about that. I don't think they should write in this way. But they were winning because they were ahead of the time with the conversation. And they began, and they expanded, I think, to America before pretty much any other newspaper. And then, the newspaper that I used to work for, The Independent, they had an office in America. I think they still do. I mean, it was about 7 or 8 years ago, but, they were doing extremely well now, and they seem to be doing extremely well now. Obviously, The Guardian. So you have these huge exports. But most British people want to crack America in some way. It's a very normal thing over here. And we grow up with a lot of American culture. Like, so I think we kind of feel slightly American sometimes, especially because the internet has kind of broken those barriers down.
Which, as you're describing kind of like those pieces on the royal family, and this, I mean, now we're really going kind of off script, but like,
yeah,
that it was like giving me some, like, I guess, like, it was making me think of reality TV.
Oh yeah.
And so like, as I'm thinking this, it's like, is the royal family, is that the original like reality, like
TV, yeah,
housewives of like, the royal UK? Like, is that what really is happening now?
Well, I mean, like, I don't know why. Like, I'm deeply offended by that as a royalist. That was a little harsh. I'm sorry. I mean, I think that I think that like that's how a lot of American people maybe see the royal family, because it's different, right? Like, because we're because they're, like, the heads of state for us, but for outsiders, I think the royal family is a sort of like, it's a kind of entertaining thing that people are keeping tracks of in a similar way, and maybe it is a bit like a reality TV show. There's certainly plot arcs.
Okay, so fair. It's not, there's an interest level, but it's, there's more substance in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's about like fame, right? And it's about like what's interesting to people about our country. Like, why would an American person be interested in the UK? Like, probably mostly the royal family and like corgis and afternoon tea and that kind of stuff.
I was gonna say music.
Music,
Like,
yes.
music has been a big export.
Yes, music as well. So yeah, music and our royal family. But like every country has its thing, right? Like that people know them for.
Fair. And do you like, I mean, like earlier we were talking, like you were saying kind of like some of the guerrilla tactics from that. So like how from this kind of, I guess, and I mean, we kind of went down the path of the royal family, but like what's like kind of this birthplace of like these guerrilla tactics in media that I feel like has like some roots in like British media?
I mean, I think that I don't know why this culture developed, and I don't know what is different about it to American media, because I wasn't kind of with American media in the early 2010s. I saw obviously, this huge thing happened suddenly when BuzzFeed existed and when Facebook became a thing, and they were producing, like social publishing happened, and I remember like when then everyone pivoted to video, so there was all of that stuff. And I think in the British media there's always been a culture of experimentation. There's always been a culture of like having people who really deeply care and who want to expand readership. And then I think as well, like there's a culture of kind of just, I think it was more about what developed then was about lots of, smart kids, like way smarter than me, like people coming along who wanted to be reporters, and then finding this new digital landscape and having the permission to experiment in ways that became deeply, deeply kind of important. And they sort of, really changed quite a lot of trajectories. When I think about, the way that we used to publish and the things that we then saw happening as a result of those stories, and just the attention that you can garner from highlighting different stories. So yeah, it was important. It was fun, and then I think a lot of people that I used to work with have gone on to do deeply interesting things in tech, in other kind of industries, like very, very related to culture, and even still in journalism.
Well, and I feel like a lot of that still has like, I don't know, like some roots or some connection into content and SEO, and like as we're looking at things like engagement metrics, and Google finally came out, I guess, unwillingly, with like nav boost of like engagement metrics, where it's like I feel like those are the things that then start resonating. Mm-hmm. And so I think there is like an interesting kind of connection there.
Yeah, I agree. Because what we were doing was learning to create content in a way that SEOs now need to create content, like with helpful content updates and things like that, which is all about the kind of signals. And when we were working in journalism, we were looking at time spent on page, and these are SEO metrics too. And and journalists were creating content, some of it being with knowing that we would have entry points with Google News. So it's not like entirely different. We would want to kind of, we know that a lot of people might be Googling something that we were writing about, and we would want to rank number one and outrank our competitors, and we would be thinking about how to do that. And I think the way that, and one of the ways to do that at the time was also through share, because Facebook was kind of exploding at the time as well, and it would also show signals. So then I think that puts it into quite good standing for SEO now. But all of it, the thread that kind of ties it all together is about creating content that people want to read and want to engage with, and then and that's everything. That's what kind of SEO is. That's what journalism is. That's what publishing is.
I totally agree, and I feel like that has that inherent connection with SEO. I could keep going on these, and I feel like I'd get lost in the conversation here. But I want to bring us back to kind of the lightning round of the conversation. And so I'm going to throw a series of kind of, shorter form questions at you. Each one will have its own kind of theme. And, it'll be more of kind of like a short form, quick take kind of question. So the first one's actually a new one for us. It's the first time I've done this one. So I'm sorry we're using you as a guinea pig on it. But the topic for this is think fast.
Okay.
How many journalism principles that apply to SEO can you name in 30 seconds?
Okay. Who, what, where, why, when, how. That is the number one journalism principle. Stick people in the context for why they're reading the story. And I think as well, you need to do exactly the same thing with SEO. So, maybe someone's coming in off a keyword. Maybe someone's coming in because they've found it in ChatGPT. They need to know why they're reading it. They need to get the relevant piece of information. And then you need to hook them in for the next bit. So they're not just kind of like one and done and going off the page. I haven't been timing that.
Slow clap. That's first time we've done that question, and I think you nailed it. So well done.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Next one's gonna be trend or trash.
Okay.
Is using clickbait ever going to die off?
Okay. Well, if I ever write a novel, it will be in defense of clickbait, because what does clickbait mean? Writing things that people are interested in and they want to read. So no, they will never stop. People will never stop writing things that they're interested in and they want to read. And if someone reels you in and they don't fulfill that promise, that's not clickbait, it's bad content.
Interesting. Okay, so you're kind of flipping it around, because I feel like there's so much potentially negative annotation around clickbait.
Yeah, but that's clickbait. Like, you made me click on the link. It's like, it's my job to make you click on the link, but it's also my job to make you enjoy after you click on the link. So it's like, so if someone says something that is clickbait, then it's not an insult that they were interested and compelled, but it shows that I did something wrong with my content by not fulfilling the promise of that headline or that piece of content. But compelling and interesting headlines have been around since the dawn of the printing press. There's a very famous headline in the UK, which is "Freddie Starr ate my hamster," which is, I think, was from even before I was born. But I remember it, because my parents used to talk about it. What I don't remember is whether or not he did actually eat the hamster.
No, which to that point though too, it's I feel like people point a lot of blame at the media and the publishing for clickbait, but it's like, is that to blame, or is it the consumer behavior? It's like, one is chasing the consumer, and if that's what the consumer's wanting and ingesting, it's like, at some point there has to be some ownership, or at least accountability of I don't know, the consumer, the public, of what they're wanting, not necessarily those providing it.
Maybe. Well, I think that the media needs to think about how to help people become interested in everything, right? When you're a journalist and you want people to read your exposés, not just your weather stories, so it's about making everything as interesting and compelling as the weather. But one thing I'll say about consumer behavior is that a lot of people read romance novels. You can see that in the Amazon charts. But have you ever met someone who's admitted, or when you say, what's your favorite novel, have you ever met someone who said oh, I love, a romance novel? Because I haven't. So I think people aren't always honest with what they're interested in, maybe not even honest with themselves with what they're interested in.
Except for the weather.
Oh, except for the weather, yeah.
About being interested in the weather.
Yes, we are allowed to talk. We are allowed to admit how much we love talking about and reading about the weather.
Next one.
Okay.
What's the word? Give me one word that describes the relationship between journalistic integrity and SEO success today.
Symbiotic. Because you need a level of integrity to write good SEO content, and that's going back to whether or not your content delivers on the promise of its headline and delivers on the promise on its keyword. I mean, like, one of the big journalistic kind of principles is that you're there to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And I don't think that I would say anything so pompous about SEO content, but I think that you have to be, I think that, you know, the best content, the stuff that's going to rank, the stuff that's going to resonate, the stuff that's going to bring what you need for your brand has to have honesty and integrity behind it, you know, and has to be interesting and has to be designed for a specific consumer and fulfill the, you know, going back to fulfilling the promise of the headline.
Love it. Toss up. Would you choose to optimize search visibility or reader engagement if you could only focus on one?
Well, I think that the two, I think that this is a disingenuous question, but I take issue with the question because you're not going to get like really good search visibility without reader engagement, not long term. But going back to everything I've said, it would be reader engagement, right? Because if you're like, because people are, if you're a brand and you want people to do the call to action, like being known as a brand that shows up everywhere but like never actually answers the question but is just always around, like, people are annoyed by you. There's no point in people knowing who you are if they associate you in a very negative way. That's not true that all publicity is good publicity. I would much rather readers were super engaged with whatever it is that my brand had to offer.
100% agree. It was a sneaky question because it's like one is chasing the other, so it's like, how do you really separate kind of between the two?
It's a good question though.
But yeah, 100% there with you. Yeah. Last one. Game plan. You're the SEO director at a major publication. What's your game plan for balancing journalistic quality and search performance?
Ooh, I don't know. SEO director, that sounds like a lot of high pressure job. I think the game plan is to ensure
it's not so bad.
I think the game plan is to ensure is that you don't, the two things can balance quite well with each other, right? Like, you can have extremely quality content, and if you have extremely quality content that, you know, you would publish it in a newspaper, it's going to perform well on SEO. And some of the SEO content that I see in the world nowadays, when I'm like, you know, searching to buy like a new raincoat, which I do, going back to the weather, you know, it's better than what I would see published in a newspaper. Like, I'm like, you know, whoever's working for this brand is incredible, and I should like go and find them on LinkedIn and try and poach them, because people are writing incredibly factual, incredibly accurate, and incredibly strong SEO content for brands at the moment. And I think those brands are kind of reaping rewards in our kind of new AI age.
I totally agree with that, and I feel like part of it is it's almost like short-term versus long-term gains. And I feel like if you over fixate on kind of like that SEO like search aspect, it's probably not going to be as lasting. And I feel like, being that journalism is a practice that has been around a lot longer, it's like, it feels like there's a lot of principles that are holding true over time, which is a lot of the areas that I think as SEOs that we should be leaning towards. I mean, there's always room for kind of like the cheap tricks of like, hey, we need a quick little bump in numbers. But if you're thinking more of like, how do I be successful in the next 5-10 years? I think you need to go after more of that kind of like lasting strategies rather than something that's more of like the flash in the pan.
I mean, this is my tip. So I said I wouldn't talk that much about GoFundMe, and I haven't, but my tip is hire ex-journalists or journalists who are kind of freelance writers as well on the side to write your content, because it will be really, really, really good. And it will have all those things, and you won't need to balance it. So, and they're also, you know, so yeah, that's my tip, to do all of that.
I guess side fun fact.
Yeah.
We actually do have a British journalist on staff.
Oh my gosh,
for part
really?
of our
What's their name?
content
Do I know
creation.
them? That's hilarious. What's their name?
Yeah, probably not, but like, yeah, no, he's been around for like quite some time, and yeah, he's just someone that we've had on the staff, and actually living down in Santiago, Chile.
Oh, nice. Not very nice. He sounds like a fun guy.
He's been down there for like 20 years, so I guess something kept him there.
Nice. I need to go to Chile, actually. I haven't been really further down than Brazil.
Well, when you need some recognitions, we're here for it. But with that, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Voice of Search podcast. Thanks again to Dina Rickman from GoFundMe for joining us. If you'd like to contact Dina, you can find a link to the LinkedIn profile in the show notes, or be sure to check out her company's website at gofundme.com. If you haven't subscribed yet and want a daily stream of SEO and content marketing knowledge in your podcast feed, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app or on YouTube, and we'll be back in your feed soon. That's all for today. Thanks for checking out the Voice of Search podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode.